Week 14 in the NFL, and the Eagles are looking to bounce back from their toughest loss of the season. The loss they suffered to the San Francisco 49ers drops them to 10-2 on the season, and they are in Big D to take on the Dallas Cowboys in a Sunday night prime time matchup. Dallas Cowboys enter this game 9-3 on the season and looking to bounce back from a 28-23 loss to those Eagles in Week 9 of this season. From the Gallery Bar Booking Games, this is the Malamut pregame show ahead of Eagles and Cowboys. I'm Mark Farzett. I'll be your host this evening, along with Adam Malamut, Bill Colarulo, host of Legal Hands to the Face podcast, as well as the Philly Sports Power Hour, and Eagles Hall of Famer himself, Seth Joyner, on the show. So much to get to when we talk about red zone offense. So much to get to when we talk about third down defense, and overall the Eagles trying to get back on track after just getting annihilated by the 49ers. Seth, we have talked a lot about energy. We've talked a lot about fatigue. Going into a game like this, prime time, under the lights, against a division rival, trying to do something you haven't done since 2011 and sweep the Cowboys, what's the energy level like right now in that Eagles locker room?
Well, it's got to be high, but it's got to be tempered. You know, this is a must-win game for them no matter how anybody looks at it. It's a must-win because if you want to maintain control over the division and the conference, then you've got to win today. You can't afford to lose back-to-back games to the other two best teams in the conference and the team that you're vying for, supremacy over in the division. So the energy had better be high. The one thing that I love about this Eagles football team, they very rarely play back-to-back games, bad back-to-back games, I should say. What they normally do is if they have a bad outing, they correct it the following week with the energy and everything else that's necessary to get the job done. This is such a taller task because, it's a divisional game, and anything can happen in a divisional game, but it's also against your most hated foe, your most hated rivalry after coming off a tough loss last week. So we're about to find out, what this team is truly made of in all three phases of the game, as well as the coaches.
Absolutely. And, Bill, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is how this team doesn't tend to have bad games. They tend to have bad halves. Well, throw that out of the way for a second because they had a horrible game last week against the San Francisco 49ers. But I love the attitude, especially from a guy like A.J. Brown coming off that loss. Throughout this week, he has been very confident. He has had that swagger about him at the NovaCare complex. When asked about what the mood is in the locker room, what the energy level is, he says everybody right now wants what is on our plate. What do you expect from the Eagles today with that type of attitude?
I expect this team to show up tonight. I think, like Seth said, I've been saying it all week on my show, we're going to learn a lot about this team. We've been debating it all season long. They've been winning, but they haven't dominated anybody. They've been a little struggling on defense a little bit. They've had a bad pass defense. They're not good on third down. They're not good in the red zone. We keep asking the question, can this team get to another Super Bowl? They could still lose tonight and backdoor their way into the 1 seed. They could still win the NFC East, but I think we learn a lot about this team tonight, how they come out, how they play, how they respond to adversity, and should we be excited as fans that this team is going to go back to another Super Bowl? I think we'll learn that tonight.
Adam Malamut, if you were going into that locker room tonight in Dallas at AT&T Stadium and you needed to say something to get that team riled up and ready to go, what would you say to them today to make sure that they had pulled focus and they are all about beating the Cowboys today?
I would channel my inner Mike Tyson and say everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's what they need to do. They need to come out and they need to punch him in the mouth. The Jets, that's an embarrassment. The way they played last week's an embarrassment. I don't think that we need to learn about this team. I think we know about this team. I think this team just needs to come out and play as one team. They need to come out. They need to, strike first. They talk about the Eagles linebackers and how the Eagles linebacker core is depleted. Micah Parsons is sick. He's playing. I think he said if he's alive, he'll be playing or something along those lines. You have a chance to really make a statement here. And this is, I hate to say this is our Super Bowl. If we come out flat and we don't beat this team, I think it's going to be hard for the Philadelphia Eagles to rebound from a game like this. If we come out and we make a statement and we run the score up and we just pound the absolute stuffing out of the Dallas Cowboys, we have an opportunity to reestablish ourselves as the earned number 1 seed rather than the guys who just got lucky by having some plays go their way over a bunch of different games.
Absolutely. And one of the things team did a favor for the Eagles today was the Chicago Bears being able to beat the Detroit Lions earlier today. But unfortunately right now, as a lot of us expected, the 49ers are taking it to the Seattle Seahawks right now 28-16 with about 11 minutes left to play in that fourth quarter. Now it's up to the Eagles to do themselves that favor today by taking care of their own business. As we know, they are still in the driver's seat for that number 1 seed in the NFC. The best way they can maintain that driver's seat is to simply keep on winning. Now, the Dallas Cowboys have been an absolute juggernaut at home. We know about 14 consecutive wins at home. Dallas Cowboys also 4 straight games, an NFL record, 4 straight games at home with at least 40 points scored. They're going to trying to set the NFL record today with 5 consecutive games at home with 40 or more points. So when we look at it like this, Adam, when you think about this defense and what they weren't able to do last week against the 49ers, what's something you're looking forward to seeing tonight from this Eagles defense and Sean Desai go up against this type of offense?
Well, last week we were talking about Zach Ertz and Shaq Leonard, right? Well, now we have Shaq Leonard, and he's starting. He's listed number 1 on the depth chart at middle linebacker. We'll see what he's made of, right? We'll see what he really has. I think if he comes out strong and he's able to hold down that middle linebacker position, he's able to play strong and kind of, help get some pressure on Dak. CeeDee Lamb's not going to be able to run all over. I'm not going to address Darius Slay. I think that's up for somebody else on this panel to
over
address.
There, we're going to mention it once or
I'm
twice
not stepping on Seth's toes over that.
Talking about.
But I'll defer to Seth on that. But CeeDee Lamb can't have the time to run all over our defensive secondary. So if we get the pressure on, if Jalen Carter comes out like the Rookie of the Year candidate, the defensive Rookie of the Year candidate that we know he is, and Fletcher and Brandon and all those guys put the pressure on and they get to Dak, we know that Dak has the ability to get rattled. We know that Dak has the ability to kind of lose his sense as to what's going on. Get that ball out of his hand fast and don't give CD the opportunity to eviscerate our secondary.
Monday, you heard from your head coach, Nick Sirianni, address the media, talk about how he liked his linebacking core, liked what he saw from Christian Ellis. Well, by Thursday, Christian Ellis was out. You had already signed. You had already brought in Shaq Leonard as a linebacker for this football team. So, Seth, obviously they didn't like what they saw from their linebackers. 2 things are going to be different about this game versus the first time the Eagles faced him in Week 9. 1, Bradley Roby is going to be your nickel corner. You're not going to be seeing the different looks go up against CeeDee Lamb. And then also Shaq Leonard out there. How big are those upgrades versus Week 9 versus this Week 14 matchup?
Well, having Bradley Roby on CeeDee Lamb makes a major difference. You've got a guy with experience that's going to be on him now. Whether he has the speed and the agility to keep up with how well CeeDee runs routes, that's yet to be seen, and whether the Eagles have to adjust by doubling him in some situations, that's yet to be seen. The area that I'm going to be looking at the most is Ferguson, the tight end, and how the linebackers are able to handle him up the middle because they use him particularly in the red zone. You're going to get those tight end seams up the middle. Do we have a linebacker that can run with him? Do we have a linebacker that can cover him without us having to go dime and putting an extra safety in the box and having to cover him that way? Listen, there's a lot to be seen here as to where this football team is and what they're made of. People can talk about what they think they're made of, but we thought we knew what they were made of going into last week. They had every reason to come out fighting, fire with fire, and we didn't see that at all. So this is going to be another one of those situations because you go to Dallas, and certainly Dallas is looking at the game film from last week, and they're licking their chops because they feel like they can do the same exact thing that San Francisco did to us. And what they basically did is they out-physicaled us. They out-physicaled us, they punked us, and they did whatever they wanted to do. Football is a game of wills. Guys don't go down because you want them to go down. They go down because you put them down. Guys don't get blocked because you want them blocked. They get blocked because you block their ass. Plain and simple. All the things that whatever you want in this game is something that you have to take. So it's a physical game. It's the type of game where, it's your will against my will, and whoever's will is the greatest is the team that's going to win the game, considering everything else considered, from the coaching to how well the players execute the game plan, so on and so forth.
John McMullen is going to be joining us in the next segment to help us break down Eagles-Cowboys in this matchup tonight. But also, Seth, I want to keep it with you. You mentioned what Shaq Leonard is made of. I think I know what he's made of. It's a question of how much he has left in the tank. After back surgery, he was asked specifically the down step of, unfortunately, the step back in terms of production from him. He was a guy that had 98% of the snaps played with Indianapolis 2 years ago. Then this year, just 70% of the snaps played. After those surgeries, what do you think Shaq Leonard has left in the tank for this game?
Well, I think they tried to protect him early on, knowing that, his body wasn't really where it needed to be. He's got 65 tackles on the season on 70% of the plays. They've also got some young guys. They got younger at that position and came to the conclusion that it's time to turn the reins over to these young guys, and we can move on, from Darius Leonard. Who knows? Because sometimes a change of scenery does a world of difference for a player. Sometimes someone not believing in you anymore and you having an opportunity somewhere else does a world of difference for you. I think, this is another one of those games where I think we're all waiting with bated breath to see what Darius Shaquille Leonard has left in the tank. Whether he's the fix at linebacker or whether this is just another Band-Aid. And as far as the whole Christian Ellis deal is concerned, listen, Christian was a good special teams player for us all year long. It's the one time that I can ever remember Howie Roseman miscalculating a move, because guess what? You could have released and re-signed Nicholas Morrow, but you weren't getting away with releasing and re-signing Christian Ellis when the rest of the league sees what he does from a special teams perspective. They had to know that they were going to lose him. So if Shaquille Leonard is the target, if he's the fix, and like Nick Sirianni said, he was pleased with how Christian Ellis played, why do you put this kid in jeopardy? Now he's gone, and there's no recourse for that, and now you're stuck with a guy like Nicholas Morrow, whose confidence has got to be knee-high to an ant, and you're trying to figure out, can we play him on special teams? How many plays can we allot him, in regular defense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Bill, what do you think is a fair snap count tonight when it comes to the expectation for Shaq Leonard?
It's interesting because it's not like he's coming off the street. He was playing with the Indianapolis Colts only a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago actually. It's just how much did he learn of that defense? Were they able to get him up to speed? Zach Cunningham was saying earlier this week how hard it was for them to get him up to speed. He said he went through a similar process when he first came in training camp. So I really don't know. I know there's reports that they're going to have him on a limited snap count. I think he'll probably get in early. They'll see how he does and how he adjusts kind of to the communication, because that was one of the issues they had last week against San Francisco. I didn't like that a lot of these guys, I don't know if it was an excuse, but a lot of these guys said after the game, we need to communicate better on the back end. That had me concerned. And I think in this game, not only do they need to communicate, this team needs to be disciplined tonight. And I'm not talking discipline from no penalties. That's an obvious one. When they rush Dak Prescott, this defensive line needs to be disciplined. You look at Dak Prescott's numbers, you cannot let him outside the pocket. He has the best completion percentage in the entire NFL outside the pocket. He's number 2 in passer rating outside the pocket, only to Lamar Jackson. So especially our edge rushers, they have to maintain and not let Dak get outside of them. They crash inside and you let Dak get out and you give him extra time with CeeDee Lamb running down the field, you're going to be in trouble. So they need to stay disciplined and generate that interior pressure, keep Dak in the pocket, and I think that would be a key to really slowing down that offense tonight.
Yeah, certainly something they were able to do in their last matchup in Week 9. Eagles got 5 sacks on Dak Prescott in that game. Adam, I want to ask you this question regarding the Cowboys here. We all know who the Eagles are. We study them each and every week, no matter what. But when it comes to this Cowboys team, a little bit of a enigma here. We don't know exactly who they are. I mean, if you ask most Eagles fans who are the Dallas Cowboys, they'll respond with a team that sucks. However, to kind of peel back the layers a little bit further and dig a little bit deeper here, they're a team that has played great at home, obviously. They've played great against the Eagles at home over a long period of time here. But when it comes to Dak Prescott, it comes to their receiving core, their defensive line, their linebackers, their secondary, the type of year that Deron Bland is having, all that together equals a team that has a plus 168 point differential. they control games with their offense and their defense being able to put up points. So, Adam, I want to ask you this. Taking all that into consideration, why haven't the Cowboys been able to beat those upper echelon teams? They obviously lost to the Eagles. They got spanked by the 49ers as well, and they just barely got past a +1 on 500 in the Seattle Seahawks. Who are the Dallas Cowboys?
So I think there's a lot of questions about Dak Prescott's mental toughness, right? I think that there's a lot of questions about how he handles adversity, and we know that Jalen can handle adversity. But I think that what it comes down to is how mature that team is or isn't. Listen, I know that McCarthy's been a great coach in the league for a long time. I don't know that he really has control on that over that team. You know, Jerry Jones is one of those owners that, he's the owner, the GM, the head coach. You know, you'll see him take over other people's roles. You know, I don't know that team can really establish its own identity with that type of leadership, right? So I think that when you talk about who the Dallas Cowboys really are, I think it's game to game. I think it depends on how the flow of their game is going. If we can get in there and to what we've talked about earlier, what Bill just talked about, what Seth's talked about, what you've talked about, if we get in there early and we're able to disrupt and we're able to get our defense all over Dak, it's a different game. It's a different team. It's a different game.
Yeah, Bill, they come into this game one of the best defenses in the NFL in terms of being able to defend against the pass through the air. They're ranked 5th in the NFL against the run. They're 12th, which isn't great by any means, but about 106 yards per game they allow defensively. We all know about, as I mentioned earlier, Deron Bland. We know about Dak Prescott leading the NFL in touchdown passes this year. If you had to sum up the Dallas Cowboys as to what kind of team they are, who are they?
I think they're a really good team. I hate the Cowboys just as much as every other Eagles fan, but you look at this team, you're right, they're good on both sides of the football. They have skill on both sides of the ball. They're playing well. I know we all want Dak Prescott to fall apart like we've seen in previous years.
Oh, he will.
I just don't know if it's going to be in the regular season or in the playoffs. That's the problem. And you look at his numbers at home. His numbers at home are through the roof. You mentioned they have a 168 point differential. It's 151 in their 6 games at home. That's their best point differential since 1966. They're doing things, like you said earlier, that no other team's ever done at home this season. Now, one of the things that we keep hanging our hat on is, well, look who they've played. And if you do look at who they've played, the combined records of the teams they've beaten at home are 26-47. The only team they played that had a winning record was the Seattle Seahawks, who no longer have a winning record. So I do think they're a really good team. I think Dak's playing really well. And they are well coached. We mentioned Mike McCarthy, but you look at the defensive side of the ball, their defensive coordinator is an excellent defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn. So as much as I want to hate on the Cowboys, Eagles need to win this football game. Dallas isn't going to lose it for us. That's my view on it.
Seth, you hinted at something that I totally agree with. I have a lot of respect for the Dallas Cowboys as a football team. They play really well in the regular season, but when it comes to push coming to shove, so to speak, I don't have a lot of confidence in them winning those big games, which is ultimately why that either a clutch gene or the waiting to choke moment seems to always happen with the Dallas Cowboys and especially Dak Prescott. So I'll ask you the same question. Who is this Cowboys team?
Well, I think they are who they are. I think, they've been classic in how they've operated all season long. And now that we come to, the time of the year where the rubber really meets the road, we'll find out if they can figure out how to not turn into the pumpkin at 12 a.m. because that's what they normally do. They're a regular season team that plays really well during the regular season. You say what you want about, this offensive explosion, but when you hang 40-plus points on the Giants twice, on the Commanders and teams like that, that's not a whole lot to write home about. And, yeah, that might give Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy some confidence, that Dak is operating the offense in the most efficient ways. But when you get to this time of the year and you playing in games like they're about to embark on tonight, a national game, a game against a divisional foe, a game with such great potential for playoff implications, their MO is to implode in this moment. Dak from a turnover position, players not making plays the way they normally make them. CeeDee Lamb is known to drop some balls in critical situations. It's happened before. Mike McCarthy, has a reputation for not necessarily, managing the clock the way that, a head coach should in the most critical of situations. And until they can prove that that's not really who they are, that they can get through a critical game, a critical situation, and beat a very good team, with a winning record, and prove that they can, overcome all these other things that have plagued them in the past, then they are who they are. A leopard doesn't change his spots until he either falls into an oil pit or until he completely sheds, until he's skinned. Okay, so they are who they are until they prove to be different.
And I think the Seattle Seahawks exposed them a little bit last week. Probably their best opponent they've had at home. If you go back and look at that game, a guy that the Seahawks really targeted was DaRon Bland. We know how good he is as far as getting interceptions. Leads the league. Set the NFL record for the most return for a touchdown. But you look at what the Seahawks did to him last week. They weren't afraid of him. They went right after him, targeted him 12 times. He gave up 8 catches, 169 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and DK Metcalf really exposed him. So I hope the Philadelphia Eagles are not afraid of DaRon Bland tonight. They only targeted him 5 times in that first matchup in Week 9. I take a page out of the Seahawks book. Go right after him, use his aggressiveness against him, and I think you'll see him get exploited tonight.
Well, I will say this about DaRon Bland and Stephon Gilmore. They're very aggressive corners. And where they get quarterbacks in trouble, and I talked about this, on my show and my podcast this week, is when you have outbreaking routes and you have crossing routes that take time, they are masterful at baiting the quarterback into believing that a guy's open and then undercutting the route, for interceptions. Now, how do the Eagles rectify that? Those crossing routes, those balls can't be right on the body. If I'm going across the field this way, that ball can't be right here. That ball's got to be out here in front of me where I can catch it or I drop it, and that's the essence of it all. There's not going to be any chance for those 2 cornerbacks to basically make a play on that ball. So what they do is they're phenomenal at closing the window. When I talk about the window, if I'm running a route and I'm going across the field and the quarterback's in there, the window between where the ball comes to me from the quarterback and where I catch it, they want to get in that window and shut the window. And if they're able to do that, they're going to knock balls down and they're going to intercept a lot of balls. So you got to be cognizant of that as a quarterback, that this is what they like to do. So the Eagles can – the routes that the Eagles need, they need to run a lot of double moves. They need to run a lot of option routes. I don't know if they have them in their repertoire because, listen, these coordinators at this point in time, when you line up in certain formations, these players have studied and the coordinators have prepared them for what you like to do in certain situations, the routes that you like to run based upon your alignment. They can tell you to within a yard whether you line up inside the numbers, outside the hash marks, inside. They know all of that. So if you're just going to run your routes with no stem at the top, they're going to run the route for you. So they've got to incorporate some things that takes advantage of their aggressiveness. Use their aggressiveness against them and how they cover. Because they are always looking to make the big play. And if they think that they can jump a speed out, they're going to jump it every single time. If they're in trail technique and they're covering a guy across the field, both of them can flat out run. They can close the window like that. Then that ball's got to be outside. Or once that guy gets to the numbers on the other side, don't keep dragging. Turn it up the field. So now you're going to lose them because they're looking at where the quarterback is. They're not looking at the receiver. They're looking at the quarterback. And if the minute they see the quarterback raise their arm, boom, they jump in the lane and they shut the window. And that's how they're making big plays. The Eagles have got to figure out a way to use that against them and make them stop doing that early. You do that with double moves, and you do that by converting routes on crossing routes. Take it up the field. You just got to do it because if you continue to play the way that they've been playing, those guys are good enough to be difference makers on that side of the football.
And for them to run the double move, Hurts is going to need time, which he did have against the San Francisco 49ers, and we talked about it. Wasn't his best game. So Jalen Hurts needs to be better tonight as well, but that offensive line, they got to give him time so that they can run those double moves.
You know what helps?
Play action.
Run the ball.
Yeah.
If you run the ball, then play action pass is alive. You can get double moves off of the play action pass. But if you're just going to line him up at 4 yards and snap him the ball and he never gets deeper than 5 or 6 yards and think that he's just going to stand there in that pocket, listen, they're not going to allow him to do that. They're going to make him, play from the pocket. That's what San Francisco wanted him to do. But Dan Quinn's not going to let him just sit back there because they like to play zone behind it the majority of the time and let him pick them apart. He's going to bring pressure at him. So they've got to figure out a way to get the run game going and balance it up. And if they can get the run game going against a team that's not really all that good against the run, they're much better against the run than they are the pass. So take advantage of what their weaknesses are. Take advantage of it so then you can use that as a strength against their passing game where they're strongest.
You want that?
This is a historical moment. I'm going to coin a phrase. I'm going to coin a term. I'm going to have T-shirts made. I want everybody to have one. I'm going to send it to the Eagles. We need Philitude. We need Philitude, right? So at the beginning of the show, Mark, Farzy, you asked, what would I say in the locker room? One of the things that Parsons did this week was he came out with this, and God bless him, he's doing a lot of PR work for colon cancer screening. Very important that people are aware of colon cancer and the screening. But he thought he was going to be cute. And I'm not sure that he's tough enough to be cute. So he came out and on a home collection kit, home screening kit, he put the Eagles emblem on the collection kit. Seth, in the locker room, what would you have done? And then what would you have done if you got your hands on Dak Prescott after he put the Eagles logo on a home collection kit?
Well, it's a little snide remark. The best way to take care of that is to go out and kick their ass tonight.
Right.
I mean, you can't do anything about it. Like, you can shoot back on social media. You can talk about it in an interview. And I'm pretty sure that it wound up being bulletin board material this week from Nick Sirianni. But at the end of the day, once the game starts, all of that bulletin board and all that he said, she said stuff goes completely out of the window. And it comes down to, have you prepared in a way that your confidence is sky high, okay? Are you playing with a sense of urgency? The little tiff that I got into last week was more directed at playing with a sense of urgency, because from my perspective, as a defensive player, this is the deal. And this is what I see by the Eagles in a lot of circumstances on the defensive side of the ball. I see guys sometimes standing around waiting for somebody else to make the tackle or make the play, okay? That sense of urgency that I'm talking about is when I see a guy with the ball, it's like, I got to get that guy on the ground. Because if I don't get him on the ground, it's a touchdown. Now, if I can get 11 guys across the board with that same mentality, now we're going to have a great defense, okay? But if the mentality is, it's my job to cover, not my job to tackle, and if I'm going to tackle, all I'm trying to do is push a guy out of bounds, no, that's BS. That's BS. That's not the way that you play team defensive football, okay? That urgency has to come from each and every guy. Each and every guy has got to realize that, every single play, even if it's feasible or not, your mentality has to be, it's up to me to make this play. And if I don't make it, it's not going to get done. That's the way great defenses operate. I'm telling you.
Well, the problem is a lot of people rely on these, people read statistics. They read box scores. And they like to talk about how many tackles some guy in the secondary made. The fact of the matter is, if the guy was covered, the ball wouldn't have gotten in the hands to get into the secondary. And that's what we have to do. We can't let the ball get past that first layer of protection if they're going to even catch the ball. So if we're not getting the pressure on Dak Prescott, he's going to let the ball go, and he's got enough talented people around him that can catch it and get in the secondary. And no, you don't want to see your defensive backs have a lot of tackles. That's a bad sign.
I know.
Tackles are an outlier now because, I can have 10 tackles in the game, but if they're all 5, 10, 15, 20 yards down the field and they rack up 500 yards worth of offense on us and hang 40, 42 points on us, you think I feel good about them 15 tackles? Hell no.
Right.
So tackles can be an outlier. So when a guy tells me about how many tackles he made, don't nobody give a damn about how many tackles you made. Did you make them for a loss? Did you make them for no gain? Did you make them to stop a third down conversion? Because if you didn't do that, who really gives a damn?
No,
Right.
That's where you knew. That's where Bradley Roby comes in here as your slot corner, coming into this game after not making that Week 9 start, not being available for it. That's where also a guy like Shaq Leonard's supposed to come in. And one of the debates we had leading up to this signing was whether or not Shaq Leonard would be a guy that would be at least good enough to help out. I considered him for a long time, Bill. I know you consider him for a long time too, at least, and it wasn't hard to be an upgrade at the position. Now, regardless of what he has left in the tank, I think between the ears, he has a lot left in the tank. I don't think we're going to see a guy in Shaq Leonard that'll take the wrong angle to the football, take the wrong angle to the ball carrier, be in the wrong spot, be out of position, and I don't think he's a guy that's going to need all that much coaching in order to help out this Eagles linebacking core, Bill.
Yeah, and defense can't get much worse than what it was last week. And a lot of people are saying, hey, we're overreacting. It's just one game. It has not been just one game. And there were some stats. I mean, you look at the last 6 weeks with this Eagles defense. This is why I say it can't be much worse. The last 5 games, 6 weeks because there was a bye, 29 points a game, over 430 yards a game, 300 passing yards a game, 4.8 yards per carry. They're only the 5th team ever to give up 2,000 net yards, 1,500 passing yards, 15 passing touchdowns, and 4.8 yards per carry in a 5-game span. Like, this is historically bad. So this defense can't get much worse than what we've seen the last 5 games. So I agree with you. Shaq Leonard needs to come in here, bring that veteran leadership, that veteran mindset. Hopefully they're all on the same page. They can communicate. And Bradley Roby is the difference this week. You cannot let CeeDee Lamb go for 11 for 191 again. Make someone else beat you. This team doesn't have the luxury that we have where if a team shuts down A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith. They have decent receivers, but they don't have a 1 and 1A like we do. Make Brandon Cooks beat you. Make Michael Gallup beat you. Take CeeDee Lamb out of this football game, and hopefully, yes, Shaq Leonard will help this defense because it's been bad now for 5 games.
We've talked a lot about the wide receivers already, the Eagles, and what they could do with this dynamic duo with the Eagles. And Jalen Hurts is a guy that's not supposed to be able to read a defense or be able to throw the ball downfield, but they're the only team in the NFL with a wide receiver duo that are both in the top 15 in the NFL, and that starts with Jalen Hurts and obviously the great talent that the Eagles have at that position, both in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Now, when we come back, another target will be ready to play today, and that's Dallas Goedert. We'll talk about what he can do in the passing game as well as the impact he can have in the run game when we come back here on the Malamut Law pregame show.